Hi friends, today we're going to continue reading our new book, The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. Today we're going to be reading chapters 3 and 4. Chapter 3, and I'll show you guys the illustration that they have. "She is called the Queen Mary," said Abeline's father, "and you and your mamma and I shall sail on her all the way to London." "What about Pellegrina?" said Abeline. "I will not go," said Pellegrina. "I will stay." Edward, of course, was not listening. He found the talk around the dinner table excruciatingly dull. In fact, he made a point of not listening, if he could help it. But then Abeline did something unusual, something that forced him to pay attention. As the talk about the ship continued, Abeline reached for Edward and took him from his chair and stood him in her lap. "And what about Edward?" she said, her voice high and uncertain. "What about him, darling?" said her mother. "Will Edward be sailing on Queen Mary with us?" "Well, of course, if you wish, although you are getting a little old for such things as China rabbits." "Nonsense," said Abeline's father. Who would protect Abeline if Edward was not there? From the vantage point of Abeline's lap, Edward could see the whole table spread out before him in a way that he could never when he was seated in his own chair. He looked upon the glittering array of silverware and glasses and plates. He saw the amused and condescending looks of Abeline's parents, and then his eyes met Pellegrina's. She was looking at him in the way a hawk hanging lazily in the air might study a mouse on the ground. Perhaps the rabbit fur on Edward's ears and tail and the whiskers on his nose had some dim memory of being hunted, for a shiver went through him. "Yes," said Pellegrina without taking her eyes off watch over Abeline if the rabbit were not there. That night, when Abeline asked, as she did every night, if there would be a story, Pellegrina said, "Tonight, lady, there will be a story." Abeline sat up in bed. "I think that Edward needs to sit here with me," she said, "so that he can hear the story too." "I think that is best," said Pellegrina. "Yes, I think the rabbit must hear the story." Abeline picked Edward up, sat him next to her in bed, and arranged the covers around him. Then said to Pellegrina, "We are ready now." "So," said Pellegrina. She coughed. "And so, the story begins with a princess." "A beautiful princess?" Abeline asked. "A very beautiful princess." "How beautiful?" "You must listen," said Pellegrina. "It is all in the story." And now we're at chapter 4. And you see the illustration there. "Once there was a princess who was very beautiful. She shone as bright as the stars on a moonless night. But what difference did it make that she was beautiful? None. No difference." "Why did it make no difference?" asked Abeline. "Because," said Pellegrina, "she was a princess who loved no one and cared nothing for love, even though there were many who loved her." At this point in her story, Pellegrina stopped and looked right at Edward. She stared deep into his painted-on eyes, and again, Edward felt a shiver go through him. "And so," said Pellegrina, still staring at Edward. "What happened to the princess?" said Abeline. "And so," said Pellegrina, turning back to Abeline, "the king, her father, said that the princess must marry, and soon after this, a prince came from a neighboring kingdom, and he saw the princess, and immediately he loved her. He gave her a ring of pure gold. He placed it on her finger. He said these words to her, 'I love you.' But do you know what the princess did?" Abeline shook her head. "She swallowed the ring. She took it from her finger and swallowed it. She said, 'That is what I think of love,' and then she ran from the prince. She left the castle and went deep into the woods, and so—" "And so what?" said Abeline. "What happened then?" "And so the princess became lost in the woods." And here we have another photograph of Abeline and her grandma. "She wandered for many days, Finally, she came to a little hut. She knocked on the door. She said, "Let me in. I'm cold." There was no answer. She knocked again. She said, "Let me in. I'm hungry." A terrible voice answered her. The voice said, "Enter if you must." The beautiful princess entered, and she saw a witch sitting at a table counting pieces of gold. 3,622, said the witch. "I am lost," said the beautiful princess. "What of it?" said the witch. 3,623. "I am hungry," said the princess. "Not my concern," said the witch. 3,624. "But I'm a beautiful princess," said the princess. 3,625, replied the witch. "My father," said the princess, "is a powerful king. You must help me or there will be consequences." "Consequences?" said the witch. She looked up from her gold. She stared at the princess. "You dare talk to me of consequences? Very well, then, we will speak of consequences. Tell me the name of the one you love." "Love?" said the princess. She stamped her foot. "Why must everyone always speak of love?" "Whom do you love?" said the witch. "You must tell me the name." "I love no one," said the princess proudly. "You disappoint me," said the witch. She raised her hand and said one word, "Farthfiggery," and the beautiful princess was changed into a warthog. "What have you done to me?" squealed the princess. "Talk to me of consequences now, will you?" said the witch, and she went back to counting her pieces of gold. 3,626, said the witch, as the warthog princess ran from the hut and out again into the forest. The king's men were in the forest too, and what were they looking for? A beautiful princess. And so when they came upon an ugly warthog, they shot it immediately. Pow! "No," said Adeline. "Yes," said Pellegrina. The men took the warthog back to the castle, and the cook slit open its belly, and inside it she found a ring of pure gold. There were many hungry people in the castle that night, and all of them were waiting to be fed. So the cook put the ring on her finger and finished butchering the warthog. And the ring that the beautiful princess had swallowed shone on the cook's hand as she did her work. The end. "The end?" said Adeline. "Yes," said Pellegrina, "the end." "But it can't be." "Why can't it be?" "Because it came too quickly. Because no one is living happily ever after. That's why." "Ah, and so," Pellegrina nodded. She was quiet for a moment. "But answer me this. How can a story end happily if there is no love?" "But, well, it is late, and you must go to sleep." Pellegrina took Edward from Adeline. She put him in his bed and pulled the sheet up to his whiskers. She leaned close to him. She whispered, "You disappoint me." After the old lady left, Edward lay in his small bed and stared up at the ceiling. The story, he thought, had been pointless. But then, most stories were. He thought of the princess and how she had become a warthog. How gruesome, how grotesque, what a terrible fate. "Edward," said Adeline, "I love you. I don't care how old I get. I will always love you." Yes, yes, thought Edward. He continued to stare up at the ceiling. He was agitated for some reason that he could not name. He wished that Pellegrina had put him on his side so that he might look at the stars. And then he remembered Pellegrina's description of the beautiful princess. She shone as bright as the stars on a moonless night. For some reason, Edward found comfort in these words, and he repeated them to himself. As bright as the stars on a moonless night. As bright as the stars on a moonless night. Over and over until at last, the first light of dawn appeared. And there is chapters 3 and 4.